Alrighty, looks like all of our speakers are either here or in the process of joining us. So I think we'll go ahead and get started. It's 2 o'clock. I want to thank everyone for joining us this afternoon for the Coordinated Land Use and Transportation Planning Task Force. A few notes you see on your screen here. The meeting is being recorded, so you can access it and share it later. It'll be available on our website, nctcog.org/LUTTF. And we're going to hold questions until designated times for speaking those questions, but you're welcome to put them in the chat whenever you have them. And of course, you're welcome to continue introducing yourself as we get started here. So if we just want to launch into a quick intro, I'm Travis Liska. I'm a principal planner here at the Council of Governments. I coordinate the Land Use and Transportation Planning Task Force with Sean, Sydney, Catherine, and others. And the purpose of this group is to bring together local governments as a forum for sharing information and best practices, really discussing how we coordinate our land use policies with our transportation policies. Because as we know, we can't just build our way out of congestion through roads. We've got to consider holistic policies that include land use. And so we bring together our local governments to talk about what they're doing, lessons learned, and insights that they can share with everyone else who's trying to make the region a great place. So Sydney, if you would go to our next slide, please. I might be seeing a little bit of a delay here.
Yeah, sorry.
That's technology for you. Yep. And
Awesome.
just think we'll keep going to the agenda here.
Sorry, just a second, Travis.
Okay.
I
why that's experiencing technical difficulties?
Yes, I'm experiencing a delay.
Fun times.
Yes. Okay.
Right. So yeah, here's our yearly agenda. And as you can see here, we do this meeting once a quarter, 4 times a year. So we have lots of opportunities for you to share and to learn from others. This is the second meeting of the year. We've got another one coming up in July and then again in October. And all of the recordings and materials on those can be found on our website. And yeah, next slide, Sydney. So today we've got a really great packed agenda of good information to share with everyone. We're going to start this off with our local updates. And these are, quick messages on things that are happening in the region, things we're working on, successes and projects in our member cities. So if you've got a quick update you'd like to share, think of this section as a place to do that. We're lucky today to be joined by Richard from Louisville. They've got a lot of good stuff happening in their downtown there that he's going to tell us about. And Sean's going to talk about the regional trail branding project that COG's got going. And then Daniel will discuss our active transportation mapping effort and analysis for the Denton County Transit Authority. And then, of course, our main themed discussion this afternoon will be on trail-oriented development. So the other TOD, and we've got some examples from our region and from other places across the state to talk about how that relates to land use policies and that bike ped transportation element there. And then we'll wrap up with a few quick announcements for things we want to share with you. So with that, I think we're ready to launch into our local updates. And I believe we will start with downtown Louisville. And we've got Richard here today to tell us about all the great stuff they've got going. This is a site where COG's invested funds. They've successfully used opportunity zones. So Richard, turn it over to you.
All right, I just want to start to make sure you can hear me okay?
Yep.
All right. I'm Richard Lutke. I'm planning director for the city of Louisville, and I appreciate y'all having me, hosting me today and allowing me to present some really great projects that we have going here in Old Town Louisville. Next slide. So I'll give you just a really quick update on 3 of our complete street projects and 5 of our development projects, and then one of our master plan update process that we're going through. Next slide. So the first complete street project is we call Main and Mill. Main and Mill are our primary streets that intersect right in the middle of our Old Town. That project was completed last year, about a $9 million project. About $3 million of that was funded with a TOD grant from COG. And so I've got about 9 photos here. It just shows just what a huge difference it has made in our Old Town area. And we're really starting to see a lot of development activity now that this first project is done. And I believe a lot of our landowners and developers know that more is coming. So like I said, this is the intersection of Main and Mill looking west, and you can see the new sidewalks, decorative lighting, crosswalks. It's just really night and day from what it was before. Next slide. This is the same intersection, but looking eastward, the other direction. You can see bicycle racks put in, decorative trash cans. So just a lot of great improvements, a lot of landscaping. Next slide. This is along Mill Street. Now, Mill Street was formerly US Highway 377 before I-35E was built, and it was a 4-lane undivided arterial street. And because it was so wide, it carried traffic at very high speeds, which made it dangerous for pedestrians. So with this project, we put the street on a road diet, and now it's a 2-lane street with a continuous left turn lane. And then the outer lanes were converted into bike lanes, and a combination of parallel parking and reverse angle parking, along with the street trees, which will be a huge benefit as they mature and provide shade on the sidewalks. It'll make it bearable to walk around in the summertime. Next slide. This is another view looking north on Mill Street. This is a section that has the reverse angle parking. Next slide. This is at the intersection of Purnell and Mill Street, kind of our southern entry into our Old Town area. And this is one of the bioswales that was installed as part of the landscaping with the project. So multiple purposes were kind of built into the project, along with multiple benefits. Next slide. Then this is Main Street looking east in front of one of our new restaurants that has gone into a restored historic building. And as you can see, that this section of street primarily consists of parallel parking and bike lanes, along with the wide sidewalks. Again, another bioswale is shown here. So again, a lot of benefits are built in. Next slide. Another shot of the eastern end of Main Street, right near the Old Town Station. And this was a kind of a triangular island. This is where our couplet begins, and where traffic is diverted onto 2 one-way streets. And this was just a huge, flat, concrete median. And that whole thing was ripped out, and landscaping was put in, and pedestrian amenities. And again, it just really changed the whole character of the entire area. Next slide. And then this is on Main Street, closer into our historic core. And this is one of the art benches that our Arts Council funded in conjunction with the Complete Street project. Next slide. And then this is about mid-block between on Main Street between Mill and Keeley. And again, it shows one of the bioswales that was incorporated into the design along with the street trees. Next slide. And I believe that concludes the Main and Mill project. Our staff is currently working with the consultant on the design of another complete street, East College Street, which is kind of the northern boundary of our Old Town district. And it'll be pretty much the same elements. Kind of putting a street on a diet, narrowing the lanes, adding in parallel parking and bike lanes, and wide sidewalks with trees, lighting, and street furniture. And this is just kind of the schematic. The current status of this project, we're about at 65% on the design. Construction should start next year. And I think my next slide is kind of a map that kind of shows where these complete street projects are located. The green illustrates the Main and Mill project. So you can kind of see those are our primary access streets that Main Street goes east and west through the heart of Old Town. Mill Street goes north and south. And then the red is College Street. So that'll be another really great connection point because College and Main are the two east-west streets that do cross the tracks and connect onto the platform, which is on the eastern side of the rail. And then in the future, shown here in blue is Church Street. That is the westbound component of our Main and Church couplet. And we have plans to apply for additional TOD funding to convert that also into a complete street like the other ones. So we're very excited about that process. And it's amazing how infrastructure improvements like this have completely transformed our Old Town area, making it even more walkable. This has given, just having Main Street done has given us a brand new route from our historic core of our Old Town area to the station. Before that project was built, we had old broken sidewalk sections. We had some sections where we had no sidewalks, very little shade. It was not a pleasant walk from the station to Old Town, but now it is, and it's getting a lot of use. Next slide. So now I'm going to cover some of the exciting developments that have been occurring over the past couple of years. The very first of our large-scale projects is our Old Town. It's just west of the platform of our Old Town station. It's a 4-story, 286-unit urban residential project, and it's what everyone calls a wrap. So the units are wrapped around a garage, and it also has 2 other interior courtyards. One has a pool, and the other one has some other outdoor amenities. Construction began in November of 19, and it was completed in summer of 21, and it is currently 96% leased. So it filled up very, very quickly, and that was about a $40 million investment. Next slide. Second project, this one just began construction a couple of months ago. This is the Main and Mill Lofts. So the image on the left, that is Building A, and then the image on the right-hand side is Building B. So it's 2 separate buildings that straddle both sides of the mill, and you're looking kind of at the Main Street intersection. And this will consist of a 2-story, both buildings will consist of 2-story parking garages at ground level, and then 4 levels of multifamily on top. So combined, the project will have 203 multifamily units, and the ground floors adjacent to Main and Mill will have a restaurant and retail spaces. So that will contribute to the pedestrian amenities along both Main and Mill Streets in Old Town Louisville. About a $40 million project, so they are well on their way with a lot of concrete work going on. So a lot of dirt flying in that area. Next slide. Then number 3, we have the Mill Old Town project. And this is at our southern gateway down at the northwest corner of Purnell. So Purnell is the southern boundary of our Old Town Design District. And Mill Street, of course, is our primary gateway from the south. And at this site was previously a former Rue Materials business, which was a drywall wholesale distributor. So kind of like a lumberyard, basically. I think historically it had been a lumberyard, and that's where the mill name kind of was incorporated into the name of the redevelopment. And one of the really scary things about the former business that was there, they had a very high volume of 18-wheelers coming in and out of the site early in the morning. And there's an elementary school about a block away. So there were small children walking to school dodging these 18-wheelers. And so we knew we had to address that immediately. So we worked very hard to relocate Rue to another location in the city. They moved about 2 years ago. And J Street will be building a 4-story building, 213 urban multifamily units. Most of the amenities will be here on this corner. And they wanted to kind of honor this the site, which was a former lumber mill, and they incorporated some design elements to kind of reflect that history. There will be a pocket park up on the end that will have some entertainment activities that'll be programmed as part of the development. It's about a $30 million project, and construction will be starting next month. And one thing I want to note too, the buildings, this is a surfaced parked project. We originally were envisioning more of a wrap product with a parking garage, and the developer came forward with this layout, and where the buildings are up against the sidewalk on both of the streets, with the parking areas back behind. And once we were going through the zoning process, really turned out to be a good thing, because the neighborhood to the west was very concerned about the impact of having a 4-story structure nearby, but the parking area kind of provided a buffer zone to the single family residents to the west. So it was really kind of a win-win situation as we went through the planning process. Next item. And then I believe this is our fourth residential project, called Old Town Station. So it's just northwest of the Old Town Rail Station and just immediately north of the ARA project. This will be the largest of the 4 projects. And again, it'll be on the north side of East College, so it'll be kind of built in at the same time as the complete street, which we're very excited about. It'll consist of 3 buildings, 4 and 5 stories tall, with 420 urban multifamily units, about a $77 million investment. One of the unique features, that upper photograph down the ground floor, will be 23,000 square feet of retail-ready flex space. So it's being built to commercial standards. It'll initially be leased out as living units, but as the market kind of matures in this area and the demand for retail and commercial kind of comes into being, then they will start converting that ground floor area, which is in view of the platform of the Old Town Station. So construction on this project starts here in just a couple more months. So we're again really excited about that. Next slide. And with those 4 previous projects all together, we got about 1,100 residential units, and that's not even including about 100 townhome units that have been under construction over the last couple of years. So you're looking at about 1,200 new units. That's really going to be a game changer, getting those heads on beds, adding to the walkable atmosphere that we've been really concentrating on in Old Town Louisville. This project, Deck on Main, is one of our larger commercial projects that's moving forward. It just started construction. It'll be a 3-story building. The first floor will have restaurant space. Second floor will have office uses, and then the third floor will be an event space with a covered deck at the rear, and that deck will be overlooking Wayne Ferguson Plaza, which is our urban park, which is really the centerpiece of our Old Town. This is about an $8 million project. So this was the site of an old bank building. It was a much smaller building. It had been remodeled back in I believe the 70s. Was not very flattering architecture, didn't really match the architecture of the rest of our historic Main Street. And so this will really be kind of filling in that block and kind of completing that void that was there. Next slide. And I believe this is my last slide. We've been working on an update to our Old Town TOD master plan. This will be our 3rd update to that. The original master plan was adopted in 2010. It was updated in 2017. And with this plan, the previous plans focused mostly on the core of Old Town and that 5 blocks that separates the station from the historic core of Old Town. But with this update, we've really expanded the overall area of study. We added that whole eastern side, east of the rail. You can kind of see the rail line going north and south there through the middle. And then we also included more of some of the adjacent industrial areas kind of in, to the southeast or on the west side of the tracks. We have some incredible opportunities for some additional TOD development, and this plan will formulate a strategy on how we get there. Another very important component is we've added an infrastructure study. So we have an independent civil engineering firm that is looking at all of our water lines, sewer lines, our streets, and our drainage facilities in pretty much this entire area, and will help us kind of pinpoint which areas we need to make our investments first, to upgrade the infrastructure in those targeted areas so that it can facilitate a little bit more rapid redevelopment of some of those areas. So we kind of learned with the Main and Mill project and the Complete Street that when you build it, they will come. Having that infrastructure in place is usually a big draw for investors and for developers. That concludes my presentation, and I'll be glad to answer questions a little bit later on during our meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. That's some very impressive and very satisfying results of planning to see that coming together in Old Town Louisville. So, you know, everyone, if you have questions for Richard, feel free to drop those in the chat. And when we get to the end of the local updates, we'll see if we've got any there. But also, Richard, we're going to push your slides on our website. So maybe folks can contact you as well if they want to do a mobile workshop there. It seems like it'd be worth it.
That would be great. We just had a mobile workshop on Monday with some planning students from UNT.
There you go. That's fantastic. Well, all right. Thank you, Richard. If you stick around, we might have some questions here. I want to turn it over now to Sean Conrad at COG to talk about the Regional Trail Branding Project. Sean?
Hey everyone, really happy to have this opportunity to give you an update on our Fort Worth to Dallas Regional Trail Branding and Wayfinding Project. Next slide, please. For the sake of time, I'm going to go through these fairly quickly, but you can get all this information and more on the website that is at the bottom of every slide here, nctcog.org/FW2DAL trail, and that will give you everything you want to know about this project and the regional trail. So the Fort Worth to Dallas Regional Trail, the history is that this is going to be a 66-mile multi-use paved trail that will connect downtown Fort Worth to downtown Dallas, spanning 5 cities. We currently have more than 50 miles existing that are open and people are using them every day. We also have more than 12 miles that are under construction currently. And the entire trail is expected to be completed by late 2023 or early 2024. And some of the goals of the regional trail that have been big goals since a trail for quite a long time, since about 2013, is to have a trail that connects these cities that can be used for transportation, getting from point A to point B, events, large and small, exploration of the region, recreation. And it's also been envisioned as a regional, state, and also national attraction for events and tourism. Next slide, please. This is a map of the regional trail and the summary of the existing funded and planned trails segments at the bottom there. And again, this website is also, or this map is also on that website, and along with several other detailed maps that show trail connections and the status of each of the trail segments. Next slide, please. Trail branding project goals here. So we are fundamentally trying to create a regional unified name for the entire trail, as well as a unified brand that's recognizable through the region and also nationally, and a signage wayfinding package that will include co-branding of the existing local trails that are already out there. We're also going to be developing a series of recommendations for holding events, so major infrastructure that would be needed for events, regional and national, creating a 911 signage system that's seamless throughout the corridor, as well as recommendations for electronic message boards, and then building consensus for the ongoing marketing and operations of the trail. So this is continued to be promoted by the region and also maintained by the region for residents' use. Next slide, please. Some of the goals that we have in guiding the development of a name and a logo include that we want this name and logo and brand to be recognizable both within the region and outside the region, nationally, locally, regionally. We want it to be very welcoming and promoting the trail for all types of users, easy to reference, easy to understand, encompassing, so that we're not limiting the brand to a specific geographic area because this may expand in the future. And we wanted also to reflect the broad values and themes that have been identified through public feedback to date for the trail and the wayfinding system. Next slide, please. So far, we have had a lot of stakeholder and public engagement, and that's ongoing. We have held stakeholder meetings to solicit feedback on naming and branding. We've held a virtual open house in late last year. We also have coming soon on Monday, opening a public feedback form where we're going to be asking the public to choose their favorite, to vote on a trail name and logo combination to go forward with. So we hope that you will participate in that public feedback forum. Next slide, please. A little bit about the virtual open house that we had late last year. We found that users really valued the trail for peace and quiet, nature, and recreation, and really preferred those natural themes and patterns and colors. Some of the phrases or words that they were interested in incorporating in a name revolved around the broad themes of Trinity, region, and nature. And people also were really interested in a wayfinding system that would be friendly and welcoming. Next slide, please. So our public feedback forum, plugging it again, opening on Monday. Cast your vote, 2 trail name and logo combinations to choose from. Pick your favorite, please. You can, if you're out on the trail, you will see these green signs out there every couple miles that will include a QR code and that you can use to access the website to provide your input. And you can participate on that at the website forwardtodallastrail.com, and you can also sign up for project updates at that website. Next slide, please. So upcoming activities that we have, of course, the public feedback forum on Monday, that will go through late May. We'll also be holding another steering committee meeting. We will be doing public promotion of final name, brand, and recommendations, and we're anticipating the project to be complete in fall of 2022. Next slide, please. So for more information, go to either one of these websites. The first website is our NCTCOG website that will give you the history of the project, as well as those detailed maps of the regional trail that I mentioned, and all sorts of information about the trail branding project itself. And to access the public feedback forum and sign up for email updates, please go to forwardtodallastrail.com. Next slide, please. Thank you. Just let me know if you have any questions. We would be very glad to hear your input and ideas.
Thank you, Sean, for that presentation on that truly collaborative project. Daniel, you're going to tell us about the routes to rail for the Denton County Transit Authority. So take it away.
Thanks, Travis. Hey, everyone. Daniel Snyder here. I'm a senior transportation planner with COG, and I'm involved in the active transportation plan team. I have a few minutes here. I want to provide a brief overview about the project we're currently wrapping up for Denton County Transportation Authority called Routes to Rail. Next slide, please. So the DCTA requested technical assistance from COG on a planning project in which we evaluate sidewalks within a half-mile radius around all 6 rail stations along the A-Train commuter rail corridor, shown here in this map. So the goal of this project is to identify and prioritize pedestrian infrastructure that will improve the accessibility for residents, workers, but also visitors to and from the rail stations and significant trip generators. We basically want to leverage our historical investments made in the transit network and improve connections for as many people as possible and provide an opportunity to increase transit ridership as well. As well as part of this project, we developed high-level opinions of probable construction costs. That way, if these agencies will have the preliminary information they need if and when they seek additional funding. Next slide, please. So what infrastructure did we actually look at within the half-mile radius surrounding each rail station? And the answer is that we looked at both the existing and the non-existing sidewalk network, including the sidewalks themselves, but also crosswalks, driveways, trails, and also unmarked crosswalks. And this sidewalk network of both existing and missing segments served as the base for our analysis. And that after identifying the missing sidewalks around the rail stations, we then went through a prioritization process, which I'll provide further information on. Next slide, please. So land use, I know this is part of the land use committee task force. Land use played a significant factor in our evaluation, specifically parcel data, primarily from Denton County, but also Dallas County appraisal districts. And the methodology for this analysis was originally developed from a Federal Transit Administration TOD planning study that Travis was very involved in for the DART red and blue lines that was completed in 2020. And from that study, density was estimated at the parcel level, and it represents the maximum number of people who may be at a property at any given time, and is based on both the land use category and the reported size. So for example, here, for every 1,000 feet of reported feet for a commercial property, we estimated 3.5 people. And the map here on the right is a heat map identifying parcels around the downtown Denton Transit Center that are estimated to have the largest densities. Next slide, please. When evaluating the missing sidewalk gaps around stations, the largest factor was the density estimate, which represents the potential new transit riders that would be connected to the rail station. But we also awarded points to missing sidewalks that were closer to the station. So density and distance were the primary factors. We also considered 3 other categories. Points were awarded to missing sidewalks that connected to major destinations such as hospitals, schools, and entertainment venues, as well as sidewalks that would address areas with a history of pedestrian crashes and posted high speed limits. Next slide, please. And after the whole scoring process, we prioritized sidewalk gaps on a high, medium, and low scale. And with this map here, you can see the high priority sidewalks in red, the medium in orange, and the low in yellow, overlaid with the density parcel data that I previously discussed. Here also with the map, the existing sidewalks are in blue. Next slide, please. So for a quick visualization, I have a few slides here to demonstrate how the prioritized sidewalks will increase the number of people, just for this example of the downtown Denton Transit Center. So on this map here, the existing sidewalks are shown in blue, with the individual parcels that are identified in gray. And as you can see, there's many parcels that are not connected to the rail station due to the gaps in the sidewalk network itself. And based on our analysis, an estimated 8,800 people are currently connected to the rail station itself. Next slide, please. However, if the high priority sidewalk gaps are constructed, an additional 1,100 people are estimated to become connected and therefore be able to access the rail station. On this map, the dark gray parcels indicate the new parcels that would be connected if those sidewalk gaps are constructed. Next slide, please. And next, the medium priority sidewalks show an additional 2,300 people are estimated to become connected. You can start to see that the full half-mile radius area is beginning to become more connected, with many parcels further away from the rail station being able to access the station itself via the sidewalk network. Next slide, please. And lastly, we have the low priority sidewalks, which are estimated to connect an additional 790 people to the rail station, which completes the full half-mile radius area. And if all the sidewalk gaps were constructed around this particular station area, the number of people connected to the station would increase by 37%. Next slide, please. So I mentioned earlier that we developed a very high-level opinion of probable construction costs for the missing sidewalk gaps for all 6 stations. The base cost doesn't account for factors that may or may not be encountered, such as utilities or lighting and whatnot. Therefore, we are encouraging every agency to look at the sidewalk gaps in more detail in order to develop a more accurate cost estimate. Next slide, please. And that is my presentation. And if there's any questions later on, I'll be happy to answer them. Back to you, Travis.
Thanks, Daniel. A lot of good slides there illustrating the process. Really appreciate you going through those details. And so we've closed up our local updates section, and we just have a few questions in the chat to kind of address here. So Richard, if you're still there, we've got a couple for you. I'm going to try and help us get through these quickly. First one here, I see Ben has asked us about additional grants. I know NCT COG will have an upcoming active transportation alternatives set aside. I'm not sure I'm saying the name right, but a funding call for bike ped projects. So that sort of addresses, I think, that question. And then so both Ben and Lashandra have asked about retail in this that's coming into Old Town. So Richard, what kind of retail do you have coming in, and is it on the ground floor of that multifamily, or is it restaurant, office? Can you tell us a little bit about that side of things?
Yeah, we're seeing a little bit of both. Our existing retail and commercial that we have on the ground floor of our existing buildings are doing very, very well. It seems like the excitement's building as more improvements are made and new projects come online. More people want to kind of jump on that train and be a part of it. So we constantly are meeting with new businesses that want to enter into the Old Town. I believe the Main and Mill project, they already got commitments for almost all the ground floor spaces, and they just started construction. So that's really good news. The Old Town Station project, they're doing their ground floor with flex space because they hadn't really identified the need yet. We have a feeling by the time they're built, they may be able to set aside some of that space for immediate retail because there's really nothing in that area, especially that close to the station. So we're anxious to kind of see how that evolves as construction starts coming up out of the ground. All of our restaurants I think we've got only one vacant restaurant space, and I understand there's like several developers that are interested in it. So it's like word is getting out that we've got 1,100 units, in the pipeline coming, and that's going to be a really big change. It's going to really change the market and the demand down here. So we think that demand will keep growing as more folks move in and we get more pedestrian traffic on our sidewalks.
Fantastic. Makes a lot of sense. All those rooftops equals new retail. Karina asked a little bit about your plan and the public engagement process. So specifically, were reverse angle or the road diets kind of issues? I know y'all did y'all's original TOD plan a while ago. Well, we also maybe we could link that. I find that and drop it in the chat here. But yeah, can you tell us about that public engagement and with those improvements?
Yes, that was kind of an educational process. We had probably the minority of our stakeholders were familiar with the reverse angle. Majority were not, and were a little skeptical. But we provided them additional information, gave them examples in other communities where they could kind of go try it out. And once they actually parked their own vehicle in reverse angle and saw, what the greater benefit is as far as safety and being able to exit safely, the idea really caught on. And now that it's in place, we still have a few folks in some other areas of Old Town that aren't familiar with it. Will almost do a U-turn and head in the wrong direction, basically. Especially when it's on a one-way street. But again, we've got signage up, and it seems like it's catching on more and more in the area. So the public engagement definitely was very important, and we had to kind of do it in multiple stages to kind of slowly educate folks and leverage the knowledge of the folks that have had experienced that type of parking before. So overall, it's been very successful.
That's great to hear. And I also linked y'all's long-range planning website on there, which I know your 2010 or 2012, I believe, TOD plan is there. So, and then you said
Right.
y'all are updating that, so that's great to hear as well. Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you, Richard. I think that's all the plans we've got. Sorry, questions we've got for you at the moment here. And I'm gonna move on now to a question for Sean, which I see she addressed in the chat on getting involved in the process, which we do have websites for that. Sean, anything to add there?
No, I think that's it, unless there's any other questions.
All right, fantastic. I see we got a question from Jason on DCTA funding the sidewalks. I don't know about, well, it looks like Karina helped answer that question, that the city and DCTA are working together to construct some of those gaps. That's great. And as you noticed, Daniel talked about calculating opinions of probable cost for funding, which is really important. So we don't just want to, point out these gaps, but really move towards that implementation step, and having that pricing is really important to that. We've also done this with the other cities on the red and blue line study we did. Dallas and Garland, I know, are some we've been working with, and we've also submitted a raise grant for a bunch of sidewalks in Dallas recently. So we'll see that come from this similar study. So we'll see if those funds move forward. And I think that wraps up our local update questions. Of course, we're going to post this recording, so if you missed something and you want to follow up with our folks, we're happy to respond after the meeting. But again, if you've got ideas for our next meeting in July for local updates, please feel free to send us an email and let us know you'd like to share, because like the great work being done in Louisville, we want to share these updates with the region. So I think we're ready to move on now to our main topic this afternoon, trail-oriented development and all the great things it can bring. So I'll turn it over to Sean to kick off this panel. And again, questions in the chat when you have them. Thanks.
Hi, thanks, Travis. So our first speaker and our main topic today is Carla Windsor. She's a senior program manager here at NCT COG, and she manages the Sustainable Development Program, which promotes and supports transportation land use connections throughout the region. So she's going to discuss the big picture of TROD in the region with a look at trail-oriented development, coordination, benefits, and examples.
Thanks, Sean. Good afternoon to everyone. Several of y'all on the meeting call today, I know. Several of y'all that I don't. We appreciate you taking your time to learn about these topics. I'm Carla Windsor, as Sean said, was formerly Carla Weaver. I might know many of you by that name, but was married the end of last year, so going by my new name, which is exciting. But we've had a very aggressive transit-oriented development program here at the Council of Governments for close to 15, 20 years. But on the same vein, I would say we've invested in a lot of trails in our region. So our team, Sustainable Development, looks at transit-oriented development, mixed-use developments, economic development, and we said, you know what, trail-oriented development we think is the wave of the future. So we're excited about the topics that we're going to have this afternoon, and kind of look at an area in our region that's sort of diving into this head first, and then also some speakers from other parts of the state who are really taking this concept and moving forward. And so I'm going to go over with you today a couple of kind of key big picture things of why we think this is an important kind of new area that cities should be thinking about, and thinking about it holistically. All right, so our first slide kind of defines what is trail-oriented development. When you look sort of at the literature, it's kind of all over the place, but overall, what we're saying is trail-oriented development aims to create a built environment that integrates adjacent trails with development to result in a building form that holistically benefits all users. So that's kind of the idea or the concept that we're trying to promote. Our next slide shows that Sydney on our team took the regional VeloWeb and she overlaid land use categories across the region. And we can see that predominantly, no surprise probably to many of you, the two top categories where trails tend to be in proximity to are residential areas and also parks and recreational space. So as a transportation agency, we're like, how do we connect trails as a more of a transportation feature to affect the daily trips? I will tell you now, this is my soundbite. I'm no longer focused or interested in our team or department about the work trip with bikes. The bike commuter from work to home, I just don't think exists anymore. It's a very small percentage of our region, and what I'm focused on are the short trips. So within a quarter of a mile, the commercial space is really the sweet space to develop trail-oriented development. And right now, I don't know that we think about that a lot. We think about the green space, we think about getting to parks, and that becomes recreation. But is there a way to bring in the transportation? So within a quarter of a mile of my house, I have a CVS, I have an Aldi, I have a dry cleaners. So are there small trips throughout the day that I could make if a trail was adjacent to these, restaurant space? There's all kinds of opportunities out there if we're thinking about them and planning for them in advance. So that 10% commercial, that's the number that we're focused on, and how do we make that more impactful in the region? Next slide. So we've invested a lot in trails, hundreds of millions of dollars the Regional Transportation Council has programmed, and we've got more coming. As Travis mentioned, we have a call for projects that'll be opening up in the next few months for our transportation alternative set aside. So it's going to be close to $30–40 million to invest in trails, to invest in safe routes to school, to invest in sidewalks. But trail in development areas or opportunities are definitely something that we're interested in and would like to prioritize. We've already built over 128 miles of trails in the region. That's a lot, but we have over 1,000 more planned. So, 128 are funded, over 500 to build. I was like, that number should be higher, but yeah, we have a lot of trails. And so in a region our size, there's always room to add more. They're very popular with the public. When you look at quality of life issues, residents always say that access to trails and active transportation is important to them. And we saw, if you'll go to my next slide, that during the pandemic, using these trails and green space went up dramatically. So Daniel Snyder on our team, who you just heard from, has consistently worked with our data team to provide what were our bike ped counters doing in the region. And so when transportation travel by air, by transit, by car were all down, bike and ped was up. So people not only just needing to be out, mental health, exercise, but access to different places. These modes were being engaged more than ever. So we know that the demand is there. And so if we can connect the use to the land use, I think there's a lot of opportunities. So our next slide goes through the benefits really of this active transportation. It encourages a healthier lifestyle. Moving in the course of your trip is a good thing. If I have my Fitbit on, I want to move even more. If I'm not wearing my Fitbit, I'm like, what was the point of this trip at all? So people create their own challenges within themselves, within families, and walking and bicycling provides that opportunity on trails. Improving quality of life. I've already mentioned that this is very important with public and community surveys throughout the Metroplex. It catalyzes real estate development. We're going to talk about some places where people are investing in trails. They're orienting development towards the trail, not the street or internal to the development, and they're seeing some big return on investments, which includes increase to property values, which includes increased potentially tax revenue or other sources of income for the city. And it really encourages public-private partnership. These are sometimes out-of-the-box ideas, and so it's really a collaborative process between a development team, between the planning department, between the parks department, the economic development department, on kind of bringing all of these pieces together. And finally, these really neat special places attract tourists, attract visitors, and really support job and business growth. As part of a community social group, we organized a group of about 40 people that wanted to ride the Trinity Trails in Fort Worth, and we had lunch plans on the Trinity Trails, and to use their different kind of stops along the way as part of an interactive social event. So there are groups kind of focusing on their activities and events and their weekends or their after hours activities in these areas. Next slide. So the fiscal economic benefits, I think they're there and they're growing. So studies have come out that the national trail economy generates more than $34 billion. So there is a market there. And it could grow to over $138 billion if we're heading in the same trajectory. Active transportation is just going to continue to increase. Proximity to trails raises property values. It used to be that when you talk to real estate councils that proximity to a golf course was the #1 thing that residences were looking for. But now it tends to be trails. And so trails are very popular with home buyers. And then if we can connect those uses to homes, even better. The Katy Trail in Dallas, one of our more popular trails, has been there a long time and thought very specifically about what this would look like, has done some studies on the return on investment. The trail and park-oriented development for the investment here is close to $1 billion. The real estate values have increased dramatically with proximity to the trail and the commercial areas adjacent to the trail. So we see that this can work. We've got some resources there. We'll also make those available later where you can kind of dive into the economics and look at the numbers. So my next slide is really going to talk through, okay, but how do you make this work? This sounds like a great idea, but this sounds maybe a little complicated bringing in all of these players. It's definitely a partnership. So I already mentioned you've got to have planning, economic development, parks. As part of a review plan when it comes to development, did we think about the green space or the trails? Are we matching up in our land use plans, the commercial, where our trail systems are at? Are there opportunities for that? I think there's conversations to be had with chambers of commerces and tourism directors and the development community to say, is this something that we can promote within our community? It's important to think through like friends of groups of trails when you think about how these are going to be maintained and operated. And you want to talk to the private sector about how this is promoted or sold. I know that there are several trails in Dallas that the residential multifamily especially is being promoted as trail access from this development property. So if that's really a selling point to certain demographics, sort of dense development areas or others, there's a way to have that conversation where areas that have this special feature are bringing in a certain clientele. The policymaking strategies are important as well. When you think about trail-oriented development to be supported through zoning ordinances, whether it's the parking, so maybe if you're making more space on the outside of the back side of a project, if it's if there's an entrance to support the trail development and then you've got your auto entrances, are they both welcoming? Is the parking right sized if you have trail access that's coming? Someone mentioned, yeah, there's a lot of successful developments along the Katy Trail and you don't use parking. Don't plan on getting to the Katy Trail Ice House with your car. There's just very limited options there, but it's wildly successful. It's an outdoor eating space, entertainment space, and one of the more successful places along the trail. In reviewing building codes to verify that their trail-friendly retrofits are supported could be an important part, including this in comprehensive plans, park plans, even talk about commercial development and opportunities, whether it's retrofitting or it's new development, and then thinking through the maintenance. These have to be well maintained. These have to be places where people want to be. And that's a partnership between the private sector, the restaurant organizations, if they are, or commercial spaces, and the city. And then finally, the funding conversation, the inevitable, well, who pays for this and how does it happen? Having those conversations early about not just the capital of the trail, but also the maintenance of the trail, strategizing possible incentives, thinking through special districts and how they might come into play. And then finally, are there test pilot areas? Can a location within your community be identified? This would be the perfect spot. So let's see what we can do to make this area successful, see how that works within our community, and then go forth and multiply if it's something that is enjoyed by the community. Next slide. There are some challenges. Just having a vision for this and the right opportunity is important. Thinking about it early and incorporating it into your current plans. A lack of coordination, communication can happen. Sometimes Parks Department is separated from a development approval process or from economic development that's bringing in commercial space that may not have that green space or active transportation connection in mind. You want to think through trail assets in a different way. Historically, they're about linking green space or neighborhoods to parks. But if you want to bring in the commercial aspect of it, it has to sort of turn a little bit on its side. Sometimes just lack of project awareness and knowing what's coming up and in the pipeline and having those conversations within your city or within your community, making sure there's funding in place. You know, if you've got a great project that rhymes with this, come talk to the Council of Governments. We may be able to assist to get this off the ground. And then finally figuring out the parking and make sure that you can do that right, that your zoning and ordinances allow for that. So there's some things that sort of tick off the box as you're working through a process. And then finally, we know that this has been successful. In my next slide, in a couple of national examples. There are projects in Louisiana, there are some in Los Angeles, Albuquerque, where different developments, coffee shops, retail are popping up along trails and orienting themselves along trails. The city of Austin we spoke to, and they have a plan for how they will emphasize trail-oriented development and build more of it in the future that they're hoping to activate soon. So we know more is coming, and we're hoping that DFW can be a region that can just model this for the rest of the country as well. And I think we've got some good speakers coming up that are going to show you how they're seeing that happen in their communities. So that's it in a big picture sort of overview. We think it's important. One of the goals of our biped data count program, we know that areas with the highest counts have the most diverse use of land uses. So areas around commercial have the highest use. People want to connect to those types of uses. And so doing more investigation into the land uses around our existing trails and areas of opportunity is something that we hope to do in the future. So stay tuned for that. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to the team who's going to walk through a couple of questions to just see how this might be on your mind in your community. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Carla, for that great presentation and pulling it all together for everybody and showing how we can do a path forward for trail-oriented development in the region. We have a couple of polls for you to all to participate in. This first one, so both of these have a QR code that you can use to respond to the code or the poll, and we'll also put a link in the chat for you to use. So have you worked on trail-oriented development projects in your current position? We're interested in hearing about whether or not you've been engaged in these sorts of projects. And so please let us know if you've been involved in transit-oriented development projects, or if you, maybe it's not technically transit-oriented, but you've worked on development projects that included a trail connection. We'd like to hear about that too. So I'll give you a couple of minutes to respond to the poll, and then Sydney will pull up those results for us. Okay. So far we've got.
Sorry, Sean, I backed out of it 1 second.
That's all right.
Okay.
There we go. Okay, so we have about 5 people who have actually been directly involved with TRD projects. And by the way, if you would, if you don't mind dropping in the chat the name of your project or or if you have a website link for that, we'd love to hear more about it and be able to check it out. More, not surprisingly, people who have worked on projects that included a trail connection. That's great to see, as well as a couple people who haven't worked on projects before. So I hope that this presentation is useful for you. Okay, let's go on to our next poll. And okay, we need to go back to our main presentation. Thanks, Sydney. Okay, so this poll, we're asking you to tell us a little bit about the challenges that you have encountered in implementing any trail-oriented development that you've worked on. Or this could also be potentially if you've seen trail-oriented development possibly in the pipeline, but there are some challenges that have prevented those from happening. We'd like to hear about that as well. So some of these things that Carla just discussed in her presentation. And so again, you can see a link to that poll in the chat box, and you can use the QR code to respond to that as well. Give that a second there. Funding availability, yeah, always the big one. And then lack of coordination. So yes, as Carla was discussing, coordination is definitely a challenge in these types of projects that are very sort of interdisciplinary, interdepartmental. You need to do a lot of coordination with different agencies and groups, stakeholders. So, and then we've got a few for vision and opportunity, and then lack of project awareness, 0 for parking. So yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you everybody for responding to that. Okay, Sydney, why don't you go ahead on to our next presentation? Wonderful. Okay, our next presentation will be from Stacy Pierce. She's the Executive Director of Streams and Valleys, which, if you're not familiar with Streams and Valleys, is a nonprofit organization that served as a voice, steward, and visionary of the Trinity River for more than 50 years in our region. And Stacy is going to give us the inside scoop on some exciting trail-oriented development projects in the Fort Worth area.
Well, thank you very much. It's just a real pleasure to be with you all today. And like Carla, there are several familiar names and faces on this call and lots of new ones. I will tell you, this is the first time I've given a presentation like this. So I've got a lot of high level information for you, but I'd love any feedback you have for me on making this a stronger presentation and presenting any other data that would be helpful to you. For today, I'd love to just give you an overview of some of what we're seeing, hopefully some great images and some things to think about. And then I'm hopeful that there will be another opportunity to delve down even further. So I'd like to begin on the first slide with an overall aerial. I'm not going to talk about each one of the things on each development on this map. However, you'll see the pins that are posted here. And we've got a lot of wonderful trail-oriented projects throughout our river and trails network. And one of the things that's exciting to me is that they're not only mixed use as we would hope and residential, but that some are hotels, some are definitely tourism oriented. But as Carla was mentioning, they do help you get from your home base, whether that be a hotel or a residential location, to a whole host of other options throughout the network. And we're fortunate in Fort Worth that really is pretty well connected. So one of the first ones I'd love to just mention is just right down here in the center. It's on Core Panther Island. It's one of the first multi-use developments in the Panther Island Central City project. And it is going to be right on the river and canal network. So in a minute, I'll show you some pictures of some of these others. I just wanted to hit a few high level talking about them first. Also on the edge of downtown is Heritage Plaza, which was a park and plaza designed by renowned landscape architect Lawrence Halpin. It's been closed since 2005, but it sits right at the gateway from the near and historic Stockyards district into downtown. And it is currently in process of being renovated, updated, and hopefully reopened in the next few years. But it's going to be a seminal project also on the trail network when it's ready. So those two are developing in different ways. And then also on this list is one of the first projects, the Papado and Papacitos restaurant locations that were on the trail years ago. They have their backs to the river, so we've oriented differently now to our river and trail network than originally those were done. We're hoping that at some point they might make some adjustments, but they were huge dominoes in starting what's become a really thriving network for us in Fort Worth. Also on the river close to Topgolf is Riverside, or the Scenic, which is one of the first major projects over on the east side of the river, and in the burgeoning Ray Street area. So as Carla also mentioned, this is a great example of residential connecting to service-oriented businesses, neighborhood commercial, and so it's developing as well, and I'd love to share more with you as those come along and online more. And then finally, a couple that are existing. Trinity Lakes is a series of lakes out in the Riverbend area, and they actually have taken old gravel pits and turned them into lakes, but the trail network is a huge part of the success of that developing project. So there will be more to come there. And then one that's been existing for quite a long time, but again, another one of the early trail-oriented areas would be University Park, which is on University Drive, just down the street from TCU. This is where the Woodshed backs up to, which was one of our first restaurants that gets on the trails. And so that particular restaurant, and again, Papa Doug, Papacitos, have started the movement toward not just having trails as a connector, but of people for bike and pedestrian recreational purposes, but also as the gateway or pathway to doing other things besides just your recreational option. So now, if you'll move on, Sydney, to slide number 3, I'd love to just walk you through quickly a few projects that are either developing or developed. One of our most exciting partnerships right now is the Bomber Spur, which is a rails to trails conversion, and the North Central Texas Council of Governments has been a huge partner in that. In fact, I think one of the first meetings I went to, our friends at the COG had called a number of us together to look at, and I know it's a very dense picture up in your upper right, that shows where the spur goes and the number of homesteads that are adjacent to it on both sides. But they had called us together to talk about this 7-mile rail line that took supplies to what was then in the 1940s, the Convair bomber plant and Carswell Air Force Base. Now, of course, Lockheed and the Joint Reserve Naval Base. We are in the throes of converting that to a trail network, which we feel like is going to be a tremendous asset, not only from the recreational standpoint, but this trail really will connect interior neighborhoods to recreational, to business, to schools. It'll offer a number of possibilities for park development, and that's what you're seeing on the left-hand side, some of the vision boards and things that we think could be added to that network. Has a number of different connections within the neighborhood, all of which are different. And it also runs along Zebo's Park as it makes its way north to I-30. And Zebo's itself, with the City of Fort Worth Park and Recreation Department, has a great master plan for it. So this transition and transformation is going to be huge in our network. And of course, one of the reasons I'm thrilled most about it is because it finally connects the two forks of our Trinity River and gives us between a 22 and a 26-mile loop throughout that whole network, which will be, again, wonderful for recreation, but also for transportation and for giving folks an opportunity to connect to a variety of other uses. Moving on, this next slide is of Clear Fork and the trailhead. So up in your upper right, you're seeing Clear Fork, the shopping area. It's a Simon property with a lot of upscale restaurants and retail. And then the other 3 pictures you're seeing in the top on the left is the trailhead, which really is a gateway from Clear Fork to the trail network on the Clear Fork section of the Trinity. You see in the middle a dog wash, and there's close by a dog park. And then in the bottom right, or left, I'm sorry, you're seeing Press Cafe, which ironically is is one of the examples that our consultant friends from MIG presented in Los Angeles a couple of years ago as they were working on the LA River. They wanted to transform it from a concrete channel into something more. And Press Cafe was on the vision board. And would you believe that's the location everybody selected as the one they most wanted to emulate. So again, I think great example of restaurants, retail, shopping, and then some uses that really are conducive to residential and having a life, even if it happens to be in an apartment on the trail. Moving on, we'll look at a tourism example, the Hotel Drover in the historic stockyards. This property opened just a couple of years ago, backs up to the trail network, which connects to Marine Creek, and then, of course, to the Trinity Trails at large. This has been an amazing economic driver for Fort Worth. And I think it's really charming that it connects two kinds of trails maybe that we think about. The traditional one that runs alongside our river and hopefully connects us to a whole other set of options, but also the Chisholm Trail and the huge impact that that had in the formation of and development of Fort Worth. So the Drover really pays homage to the Chisholm Trail as one sort of trail, and then certainly touts its adjacency to the Trails network as a competitive advantage and one of the things that they highlight for visitors coming to Fort Worth. Moving along next would be the Phyllis Tilley Memorial Pedestrian Bridge. So this pedestrian bridge is one that Streams and Valleys raised the money for and advocated for. It connects the two sides of the river and our thriving network right in the middle of Trinity Park, which is our most heavily utilized park at this point, boasting more than 1 million visitors a year. But as we've talked to trail users, one of the things that they've asked us for is not only more access, but more beauty and more amenities that make their time on the trail or in the park more pleasant. And so we are about to kick off the public phase of a capital campaign, probably early fall, that will add a couple of things to this landscape. For those of you who may not have been here, on the east side of this bridge, which is to your right, is Rotary Park Plaza, and it has a pavilion and some areas for seating and some parking. On the west side of the river in Trinity Park proper, we really don't have any of those amenities except for a bench or so. So we're going to be adding some wildflower planting areas, a seat wall, and a harvest table, which will give folks a place to sit and enjoy the bridge itself. We'll be adding a light and a place for them to place their love locks. So if you were to zoom in on the bridge itself, you would see cabling alongside both sides of that bridge. People have a tendency to put locks with their names on it to celebrate the people they love. And the bridge really isn't built for that, and yet it's a really charming grassroots effort. So we're hoping to provide a place that they can do that, that we can keep into posterity. So so those improvements coming soon that we hope will add a lot of not only beauty but functionality to that portion of the trail network and within our beloved park. Moving ahead again. This is the River District, which is off of White Settlement Road, and it boasts a number of residential products. So there's and I'm sure it's not big enough for you to see well, but their master plan in the center of your screen that shows a number of different housing options, from small 2- and 3-bedroom options for lease or purchase to larger, more substantial homes along the river, and some most beloved restaurant options in this photo. Salsa Limon on your upper left, Jamel on your upper right, and then down in the lower left, Heim Barbecue. This is a burgeoning and very rapidly developing area, and can't wait to see what it brings, but most definitely a coveted spot of our system. And in this particular area, a tremendous amount of different retail option and office option, and then of course the residential. Next slide, please. This would be river walk homes, which are east of downtown, again in the neighborhood close to Topgolf. But these are townhomes. Our friends at Village Homes are really experimenting with a lot of product along the river. And this area should give, and it's just now starting, so a lot of different options that are still in the sketch phase, not yet developed. But what you're seeing, I believe, is what they call the coastal design of this particular area. And it'll be exciting to see what that connects in a new area of our river network. And going ahead. Waterside is located off of Bryant Urban Road on the west side of town. Like many of the ones we've talked about, it features a direct connection right behind it to the Trinity Trails network, just down from Clear Fork and the trailhead, and features a great set of service options. So you're seeing here Whole Foods, restaurants, The Rim and Piatello, a lot of different residential product, all mostly for lease, although there are a couple of new for purchase options, and then several other restaurants in addition to those, plus REI and great access to across Chisholm Trail Parkway, again to Clear Fork and the trailhead. And then finally, my last example is West Bend, which is across from University Park, and on the area of the trail that again is so mixed use. This though much more commercial, so not a residential product here proper, but really close to our zoo and our Colonial golf tournament when it happens at the Colonial Country Club, and a lot of other residential and retail options, a lot of neighborhood access through West Bend. Each of these areas is incredibly popular. They're in various stages of development, especially some of the residential ones, but we're so fortunate to have a diversity of product that is, I think, a benefit not only for our local residents, but our tourists, and an amenity that gives us a competitive advantage as we seek to improve our workforce and as we grow quite rapidly in Fort Worth. I might tell you there is a new exhibit at the Fort Worth Museum of Science and History. It is the Biennale exhibit, which was on display in Venice back in November of 2021. It is all about watershed urbanism. So I work on the river and the trails, but it's a similar idea in that we want our environments to be symbiotic and complementary, and we want people to be able to utilize them in a variety of ways, both functionally for transportation, recreationally, and also to be able to use some form of transportation, bike or ped, maybe to even do some of the things that are errands and service-oriented trips. And so I feel like in Fort Worth we're doing well, but that has only given us more opportunity to do this next thing, which is the big idea, and that would be for us to really pay off our idea of, if Sydney, if you'll advance one more time for me, the River Loop Trail, which is the connection, river and trails, not only for Fort Worth to Dallas, but Fort Worth to all of the other municipalities and cities that have a trail network existing or planned. So if we can get all of this connected, the purple and the red, we'll have an incredible network of more than 240 miles. And I think regionally, we can probably agree, I'm not sure anyone has a network like that, that also features the diversity that ours does. So thank you for letting me hurtle through this rather quickly. I have another presentation to give shortly off-site. And so I'd love to have feedback or questions. Feel free to email. But I'm really grateful to Carla and to Sean for inviting me today. And I hope this has been, albeit quick, at least a high-level look at some of what exists and what is on the way in the really near future, in the next year or two.
Thanks so much, Stacy. That was great. It sounds like there's some really exciting stuff going on, both currently and upcoming in Fort Worth. So it was really great to hear about those. We really appreciate you sharing that information with us. And as Stacy said, she needs to head out for another engagement. But if you have questions for her, please feel free to drop those in the chat, and we'll coordinate with her afterwards to get you some responses to those questions.
I'd also say I'd love for you all to come. It would be fun, even for me living close to these, to do a site visit and tour. So if that's ever of interest, let's get on bicycles. Let's use cars and trucks and trains and whatever we can, and see if we can see some of these things. We'd love to host if there's an opportunity.
Thanks, Stacy. I have a feeling you might get a few takers on that offer.
We're ready. Come on down.
Wonderful.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Okay, our next presentation is going to be from Sarah Torson. She is a planner specialist at the Houston Galveston Area Council, HGAC, which is kind of our counterpart down in Houston. She coordinated HGAC's Bringing Back Main Street Roundtables, assists with the Regional Conservation Initiative, and she supports trail-oriented development work in their Sustainable Development Department. She's going to introduce us to a great resource that they've developed, the Trail-Oriented Development Primer.
Great, thank you, Sean, and good afternoon, everyone. As Sean said, my name is Sarah Torson, and I'm a planner specialist here at HGAC. And I'm going to introduce you to our Trail-Oriented Development Primer and then talk about some local examples of TROD from down here. So next slide, please. Since we've already heard from Carla about the benefits, I'll skip past healthier lifestyles, good for business, reduced vehicle emissions, and I'll just get right into our Trail-Oriented Development Primer, which was developed in 2018 as a tool for local governments and trailside property owners. And really, the primer outlines some strategies for identifying the right parcels, for adding a whole host of amenities, and then also doing other site-specific improvements that can help improve trails, and then ultimately prompt more investment in trail-adjacent properties. So there are several case studies included in the primer. There's 3 that are from within our Houston-Galveston region, and those illustrate how low and moderate and high investment examples of trail-oriented development have the potential in our region. So those scenarios in 2018 were hypothetical, but I'll touch on 2 of the case studies and how they've come to fruition in the city of Liberty, and then also along Buffalo Bayou in the city of Houston. And the link is on the slide here for if you want to go look at the primer afterwards, and I can put it in the chat afterwards. Next slide, please. So first, here's a look at some of the strategies for adding amenities along trails. It's probably pretty small on your screen here, so I'll encourage you to go check out the primer online. But you can see we have outdoor strategies and indoor strategies. And the key here is that we say all of them are location dependent. So you might want to use a mix of low, moderate, and high investment strategies. Maybe you want to add a bike rack, work with local businesses to negotiate discounts for trail users, and then also get some more expensive permanent wayfinding signage. And that's all based on the local context of what you need. And then also they can all be phased to prevent those expensive upfront investments. So if you have a senior living facility that is along the trail, you might first invest in benches and shade trees while you're simultaneously working with the local planning and public works departments to ensure that that portion of the trail is retrofitted or designed to be age appropriate and age friendly. Next slide, please. So the primer then goes into describing sort of these 3 main requirements for trail-oriented development, which Carla touched on a little bit earlier. We have the same 3, surprise, partnerships, policies, and funding, and then how specifically municipalities can help with these things. So the first one's partnerships. Trail-oriented development always involves at least two stakeholders, the trail owner and the property owner. So municipalities can help to connect these partners, or they might be these partners, but they can start conversations with local business owners, property owners, elected officials, economic development tourism directors, the list goes on. And then also offer municipal rights of way for trail amenities, and we'll see that later in the City of Liberty example. And then also they can meet with developers to clarify what is or isn't allowed along trails, support trail-related events, and that's always a fun one, and then also provide information to businesses on how they could apply for a bike-friendly designation. So next slide, please. The primer then goes into policies. So municipalities obviously have a big role to play in trail-oriented policymaking. One way that we've touched a little bit on earlier is by gathering that data to understand trail usage before and after implementing any of these strategies, which includes, analyzing local parking demand and adjusting parking ordinances to free up some space for trailside amenities. And then also reviewing building codes to ensure that bike-friendly retrofits are allowed. And then finally, just including trail-oriented development as a focus area in parks and trail plans. Next slide, please. So here's funding. Most strategies are on private property, so it's pretty important that local governments make investment easy and worthwhile for trailside businesses. So municipalities can offer matching grants, usually for some of those lower investment strategies or pilot projects, connect property owners to community groups or revitalization groups that can donate their time or other things like benches and trees and bike racks. And you can even explore options for allocating a portion of sales or property tax to trail improvements or that ongoing maintenance. Next slide. I apologize that I'm moving through this kind of fast, but I'm going to now jump into a couple scenarios that are in the primer, starting with the City of Liberty in Liberty County. And this was our low investment example. So you can see here HGAC, this is our region in the state context. This was a project that was done in partnership with the Trinity River National Wildlife Refuge. So if you go to the next slide. So the Trinity River National Wildlife Refuge and the City of Liberty worked together on this one to connect the town of Liberty to a trail system that was already existing in the refuge. And they started at the municipal park, which if you're looking at this map, it's actually the yellow dot that's not in the red box. So up northwest or northeast. And they started there since people already were going to the park for their access to green space and recreation opportunities. And they worked with volunteers to erect a trailhead there. And then they next decided to target locations where city roads terminated at a levee. And the two locations, you can see those yellow dots inside the red box, are where they added gateways or trailheads, they're placed in middle and low income neighborhoods, and they're nearby downtown Liberty. And you can see that with the logo, the city logo, that's downtown Liberty. And so people in the neighborhood were already visiting the forest through those points, but they formally opened them with kiosks, with wayfinding signs, and parking lots. And they worked with the City of Liberty on that to put those amenities on city property. And then since the completion of those trailheads, and they also have put them on Google Maps, they've seen that visitation has increased. And people from across the country come to visit the wildlife refuge, and then in turn, they're able to come in and visit the shops and restaurants in the City of Liberty. Next slide, please. So this next scenario is in the City of Houston, and which is in Harris County. And this was deemed the high investment example. So you can go to the next slide here. So the Buffalo Bayou Partnership, which is a nonprofit, owns this 22-acre vacant site at the Lockwood Water Treatment Plant, and they've owned that since 2012. And they've been making a lot of progress on their multi-phase plan to build trails and amenities along the Bayou, Buffalo Bayou, which runs right through downtown Houston. And I'll just add a quick reminder that this is the before and after on this slide doesn't refer to the work that's been completed. It's actually the image from our primer, which was a scenario. But like I said, the partnership has been making tremendous progress building trails along the Bayou. And if you're visiting Houston, I highly recommend a visit. But as of 2021, this site is in the planning stage, but moving forward. And it's set to include a visitor center, event space, a cafe, and a dock where people can rent kayaks. So those are all high investment amenities, but the trails along Buffalo Bayou are also all very well integrated into the city of Houston. And at some of the already completed portions, there are food trucks along the trail, basic things like water fountains, and then stairs and ramps that take you directly up into city streets. So it's been a really successful project here in Houston. Next slide, please. So if you'll just indulge me, I'm going to depart from the primer a little bit to spend my last few minutes talking about a project that is relatively new. The primer was published in 2018. This is a project that is deploying a lot of the strategies from the primer. So a few months ago, 5 entities, the cities of Fulshire, Weston Lakes, Wallace, Eagle Lake, and then Austin County, officially formed a local government corporation with the purpose to build a shared use trail along a former rail corridor, and this is all west of Houston. So if you're looking on the map, you can see that Houston's all the way to the east, and then the trail moves westward. So one of the key elements of the vision that the group of cities in one county have together is this idea of trail towns. So a trail town is defined as a community that supports trail users with services, promotes the trail to its citizens, and embraces the trail as a resource to be protected and celebrated. So all of these cities have agreed that they plan not only to design, fund, and build a trail, but they want to work with city representatives and existing businesses and developers to entice people off the trail and into their rural and small towns along the route. And since biking is already a popular weekend activity on the country roads west of Houston, they're thinking that by orienting amenities to be biker friendly in the trail adjacent towns, it'll be a win-win. More visitors to the small towns, and then the bikers get a safer place to bike than just on the shoulder of the road. So we're excited to see how this project progresses in the next couple years. And I think that's, if you go to the next slide, I think that's all that I have. I put the website again, and I believe someone put it in the chat as well. So thank you. And thank you all very much for your time.
Thank you, Sarah, so much for joining us to share about that wonderful resource. We really appreciate that. And we are going to go on to our final presenter, who is, excuse me. Just 1 second here, just have a little bit of a slowdown for some reason. Okay. There we go. All right, sorry about that, everybody. So our final speaker is going to be Erica, excuse me. Erica Moronick from the city of Grapevine. She has 17 years of planning expertise and has been the planning services director with the city of Grapevine since September 2021. Prior to that, Erica was the development project facilitation manager for the city of Denton in our region as well for the development services department. She is going to talk about trail related projects in the Grapevine service areas. Thank you for joining us, Erica.
Thank you. Can you hear me, Sean? Can you hear me, everyone?
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful. Good afternoon. I'm Erica Moronick, Planning Services Director. Next slide, please. So I'll be your speaker this afternoon, but really the credit needs to go to Ms. Kathy Nelson, who's our capital improvement and planning manager with our Parks and Recreation Department. She's really the individual who prepared this information. Unfortunately, she's out of town this week and was unable to join us. So that baton has been passed to me in Planning Services, which is a different department, and I mainly work on our current and long-range planning projects and with our code enforcement group here in Planning Services for the City of Grapevine. Next slide, please. So for the Dallas Road Transit Oriented Development Corridor / Cotton Belt Extension Project, this began mainly in May of 2016 through the adoption of the city's strategic plan. And then in 2017, the Grapevine Parks and Recreation Department really led the funding and schematic planning efforts, working collaboratively with several consulting firms, including Halfin Associates, Architectus, Hewlett Zollers, and the city's Public Works Department, to submit a plan to the COG's Transportation Alternative Set-Aside Funding Program, in which they were awarded some funds to begin construction and design of a 1.5-mile segment of the Cotton Belt Trail through the city of Grapevine. So construction began in January of 2020 and was completed in September of this past year, in 2021. And the design and implementation of this plan includes many complete street components to the project, and has finished about a 6-mile component of the Cotton Belt Trail through the city of Grapevine. Next slide, please. So the project at a glance includes alterations and enhancements to a segment of the Dallas Road Corridor, which is immediately adjacent to a major thoroughfare of South Main Street, which is our historic downtown. It also facilitated improvements to pedestrian, bicycle, and vehicle access to a new TexRail station that opened, and as part of the overall city's transit-oriented development district. And it created more of a comfortable and safer zone for pedestrian and cyclists. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the Cotton Belt Trail through Grapevine. As you can see, the existing trail was already constructed, and that was from about Pool Road on the west side of town all the way up to Ball Street. So this segment included from Ball Street to Dooley, which was completed in June of 2021. And there is a missing segment that would complete that portion of the trail system through the rest of Grapevine and up into Coppell. That has been funded and is approximately at 30% design. Next slide, please. This slide shows where Cotton Belt Trail extension began and then where it's proposed to extend through over into the city limits of Coppell. We do anticipate that additional construction will begin soon to complete it through Texan Trail and allow for connection across Texan Trail, which is a TxDOT right-of-way, through to Coppell. Next slide, please. This map indicates more of a detailed aerial look at what was constructed. The extension project incorporated the alterations and enhancements to Dallas Road Corridor. And what it was trying to do was connect to the city's other investments and work with the TexRail station, our downtown historic area, and then our future transit-oriented developments. So also at the northeast corner of South Main Street and Dallas Road, the city had a fairly large investment in public-private partnership with TexRail, Corey Hospitality, and the Harvest Hall developers in order to provide a 552 public parking garage, Harvest Hall, which is a food hall, the Vin Hotel, and then the train station, which is connected to Harvest Hall. Next slide, please. The main aspects of this project included complete street components, and as mentioned before, we accommodated 1.5 miles of the Cotton Belt Trail, which was all off-street. It's part of an important 57-mile regional trail, which is part of that 2045 regional VeloWeb plan, as well as a central local trail with many planned connections to the city's existing trail system that are also shown in the city's 2016 Grapevine Master Trails map. Grapevine was awarded about $5 million in funding because the project scored well in the following criteria, which improved regional network connectivity through additional shared use trails and sidewalks, improvements to safety for pedestrians and cyclists, reduced congestion through the provision of alternative trail options, provided safe crossings of major obstacles, and improved access to disadvantaged populations through more trail and sidewalk connections. And it also received quite a bit of community support, including adjacent businesses along the Dallas Road corridor through letters of support, public meetings, and workshops. And in this concept plan, you can see that both the connection to the existing trail, there were future sidewalk connections, there were enhancements at South Main Street along Dallas Road, and there were multiple other connections. Next slide, please. So the main thing that we did with Dallas Road is we did a road diet, as Mr. Lukey had mentioned during his update to the projects for the Old Town in Louisville. What happened with Dallas Road was it was a segment of a thoroughfare that was about 5 lanes wide with a continuous left turn lane. And what they did was they brought each of those travel lanes down to 11 feet. They included a raised landscape median with to provide a divider line. They separated the multi-use path or the trail away from the roadway. They provided a barrier and put landscaping and street trees between the new roadway and curb line and the proposed multi-use path. And they provided pedestrian scale lighting. One of the main things that both the Public Works Department and Parks and Recreation Department staff did is they spoke with each of the property owners and tenants they went door to door to get buy-in. They sought to reduce the number of curb cuts, which led to the success of this project. Now, there weren't as many curb cuts because a lot of the uses along this were multifamily, or they were larger end users, larger parcels. There weren't as many connections onto this segment of Dallas Road. But ultimately, for specific design components, they overall reduced the number of driveways. They were able to tighten up curb radii and provided some armored radii, and they did that through stamped concrete paving, so that would alert the drivers and walkers and cyclists that there was something there that they needed to be aware of. They reduced vehicle turning movements by putting in that raised landscape median. There were no longer those free left turns. There were some directed left turns, and they used different materials to mark trail crossings over both driveways and then for those connections across Dallas Road. Next slide, please. These project specifics indicate some of the improvements as they were undergoing construction. The one on the far left shows some of the concrete and paver markings that were provided at South Main and Dallas Road. The one to the right of that shows the armored radii that were put in to allow for the longevity of these new driveway aprons that were constructed. And then you can see in the middle the completed trail adjacent to the Tex rail line that's existing. And then on the far right, you can see one of the raised crossings with the pedestrian scale lighting, and then some of the signage and markings that makes it safer and a refuge for both cyclists and pedestrians. Next slide. This was the roadway section that was approved and has been implemented in constructed. You can see that the multi-use path is well off the roadway and has a small distance, planting distance with street trees and other ground cover in order to distinguish it from the travel lanes of the roadway. Next slide, please. These are examples of driveway treatments and some of the driveways that were closed. Next slide, please. And this is heading eastward from Ball Street, so you can also see the islands, the refuge islands and restricted vehicular movements that were placed. Previously, there would be free right and left turns from Ira E. Woods connecting northward, and those were restricted to have hooded lefts. There was some concern about that from property owners and business owners at the time, but since its implementation and completion of construction, there haven't been as many complaints. Next slide. These are some examples of the mid-block crossings, crosswalks, and sidewalks and lighting that were put in. They're very visually appealing. You can see that they're brick or pavers, and they are very clearly indicating a distance between the roadway and the multi-use path. And then it gives the drivers an indication through vibration when they're driving over it that they're passing over something that they should be aware of. Next slide. So overall, what was completed with completion of construction were 6-foot wide sidewalks, approximately 125 shade trees and pedestrian lighting were added along this corridor from Ball Street to Dooley with benches and trash receptacles. So I believe that would fall within those low impact investments that Ms. Torrenson was mentioning earlier in her presentation. There's landscaped centered medians that are approximately 5 feet wide with buffers from back of curb, narrower 11-foot wide travel lanes, reduced number of driveways and tighter radii. There are 3 major mid-block crossings with the use of pavers. There's also a new signalized intersection with crosswalks and pavers that hadn't previously been there. 2 enhanced signalized intersections with the refuge islands, and this makes up that 1.5 miles of completion of that Cotton Belt Trail. Next slide, please. I'm sorry, I'm just not seeing the slide progress. Okay. As mentioned previously, these improvements coincided. They were separate, but working and really dovetailing with some overall long-range planning efforts that the city was embarking on at the time. So at the same time in 2019, the city did adopt our Transit District Overlay Ordinance, which allowed for additional flexibility and reinvestment in an area that had been primarily heavy commercial to industrial uses along this segment of Dallas Road. While there were some existing single family uses along the eastern side of the corridor, this is an area of particular interest for the City Council and for residents. They want to see investment, private investment brought to this area after the city's investment within South Main and the historic township district. Next slide, please. What really spurred this off and predates the Transit District Overlay Ordinance was the public-private partnership with the city with Quarry Hospitality for that parking garage that was previously mentioned, the hotel, Grapevine Station, which is the Texrail station, and Harvest Hall, which is the food hall that's located at that northeast corner of South Main Street and Dallas Road. So this does predate. The entitlement started in 2016 and construction completed before construction finished of the Dallas Road and Cotton Belt Trail improvements, but they definitely dovetailed recently. And the city did this investment because they wanted to see additional private investment. And while that hasn't happened, probably at the rate at which the City Council would like to see it happen, it definitely has spurred additional interest in the area. We actually did just approve, or the council did approve, a brownstone project, which is more of a townhome project on approximately 1.5 acres just southwest of here, back in March. So that would be our first TDO development that would take advantage of our TOD tool. Next slide, please. This is some imagery of what was constructed and completed showing Grapevine, Maine, the hotel and the parking structure. Next slide. and some before and after pictures showing completion of that multi-use trail, the raised median, street trees, and landscaping. Next slide. Next slide, please.
Erica, I think there's a little bit of a delay in the slides being shown on your end.
I think so too. I'm so sorry.
Yeah. No, it's not your fault. Just give it a couple of seconds.
Okay. Do you see right now? Are you seeing the before and after image? The
Yes.
right image is
Yes.
South Dooley Street. Okay, so you can see where it was the 5 lanes with the continuous left turn lane, and now it's got the signal with the raised median, landscape median.
Yep.
Okay, next slide, please.
And now we're seeing your project images
Yes, ma'am.
with the
Yeah,
4 pictures. Yes.
So you're seeing all these new improved crosswalks are low investment benches, and then our paved crosswalks. Next slide, please.
More project images.
Yeah, okay, there we go. There's the trail next to the text rail line. And next slide, please. And then that completes our presentation.
Wonderful. Thank you, Erica. We really appreciate that update. Really cool stuff going on in Grapevine. I'm excited to check it out. I'm sure others are as well. And thank you, everybody, for your patience with our technical difficulties. Great. These were all really fabulous presentations. Really appreciate your input and participation, everybody. I did see Clayton Comstock mentioned that there is an event tomorrow morning where it sounds like Erica is going to be presenting. If you wanted to mention that really quick, Clayton. Or Erica.
Sure, it starts at 8:30 and we'll be there. They've rented out a room and I think the coffee's free.
Okay, it looks like it's at Redefined Coffee House in Grapevine. It's a Midwest Texas APA Lattes and Leadership event. So if you guys have a link to that, you want to drop in there, that would be wonderful. Okay, we're going to head in. Oh, we have announcements next. Sorry, I got ahead of myself. Thank you. So yeah, we have a couple of announcements to share with you all before, hopefully we'll have a few minutes left for some questions. Next slide. Okay, Sydney on our team is going to give you a little announcement about our community gardens program guide that we're working on.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sydney Mangini, and I'm a transportation planner here at COG. I just wanted to give a quick announcement about our upcoming community gardens program guide that we're developing. It's going to highlight the connection between food access and transportation and land use, as well as provide an overview of food deserts and food access issues in North Texas. It's also going to provide some guidance and tools for starting a city-led community gardens program, as well as a green space analysis, which we conducted that shows best potential garden sites on publicly owned properties near transit. The guide will also highlight some common challenges and opportunities for garden programs in general, and the expected completion date will be late 2022. So more information to come. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sydney. And then we have one final announcement from Travis.
Yep. So last task force, we presented that we are going to be trying to collect parking use data from a variety of sites across the region. And we had previously had a deadline of March 31st, but we're extending that so we can recruit more properties to go out, count parking utilization, and look at our parking use needs across the region, see if we have enough parking or too much parking. There's a lot more on this project that we could talk about, but for the sake of time, I recommend you go to nctcog.org/parking, where you can find more information about this project, as well as my contact info, Catherine's contact info, and we're happy to talk further about that. But we'd appreciate you taking a look at this, because we would like to have more sites from more cities in the region that we can include in our parking data counts for advising regional parking policies and helping all you do more great developments. And before we move on further, I just want a reminder that this event is AICP credit certified. So if you've been attending, we can offer AICP credits for this meeting. I'll put that in the chat too, Sean.
Sounds good. Yes, and we have the slide here as well for after today's meeting. Be sure to log in for your credits if you'd like to claim those. We also have a post-event survey and our slide there where you can access the meeting recording, or our website, excuse me. And we'll also be sending a follow-up email letting you know when the recording is posted and with any other resources. We have just a couple of minutes for a couple of comments and questions in the chat. We think we've covered all of our questions from the local updates. We've just got a couple of comments and questions for our presenters. Just a comment from Don Rains. Katy Trail was a success even without providing a single parking space. So thank you for making that observation, Don. Ben Hyde had a, sorry.
Oh, I only say that because it helps in an urban context. That doesn't help everywhere, but I guess
Sure.
that just helped in that situation. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you for making that point. We had a couple of questions from Ben Hyde. He is asking, what is the difference between trail and transit-oriented development? And what is the biggest issue with connecting these uses to other areas like Arlington or other areas of the Metroplex? Does anybody want to take a stab at either of those questions?
I can take a stab at that. I would say that transit-oriented development will need a transit component. Trail-oriented development, not necessarily. So Stacy gave us some great examples of trail-oriented development without a direct access point. And transit-oriented development is normally associated with light rail or fixed guideways of some sort. So those are the two big differences. One is a transit focus, and one is the path of the trail itself and where the development is within proximity. And I would just say some of the biggest challenges, and maybe in like a community like Arlington or others, is just in any urban setting, urban, suburban, or a historic downtown where areas are already built up, land is already claimed, development already exists. Going back into those areas, getting access easements, creating trails in existing infrastructure can be challenging just because of the unknowns of infrastructure, where utilities are, getting agreement among property owners. So if you have new development, I think there's a lot more opportunities. Retrofitting existing developments in established communities you have to be a little bit more creative and innovative, I would say.
Great, thanks, Carla. Any other comments on those questions from any of our speakers? Okay, another question that Ben had is, I feel like somebody's trying to say something. Okay. Another question that Ben had is there access to existing and new electric bike stations as new trails are connected to existing ones? Would anyone like to speak to that question? Or, yeah.
I don't think, and some of the cities may correct me, or there may be a trans agency on this call, electric bike stations, we've had scooter companies come through. We've got bike share. It's not electric bike, it's a standard bike in Fort Worth, but that's pretty rare in other places in the Metroplex. One or two of our universities are trying out bike share, but not necessarily electric. Electric scooters have come and gone. There are cities that are working to reestablish plans for those. And then they're working with transit agencies because they tend to travel with transit. So it's important at the trail locations and train locations. I think you asked about transit-oriented development and bike stations, and definitely the bike share systems along the Trinity Trail in Fort Worth are very popular. And they look at the usage rates of those. They balance them, as they call it, and move it around to other locations where they're popular. So I think there is some work being done in this area, but there are, of course, other areas to explore.
Thanks, Carla. We are out of time, so thank you for those questions. We also had a couple of other comments in the chat of projects that people have worked on, which we were asking about. We appreciate that. We'll definitely check out those projects and maybe follow up with you all to learn a little bit more. So thank you for participating in that and joining us today. Hope to see you all out on the trails, and we'll go forth and prosper in trail-oriented development. Thanks, everybody.